Hi, I'm Chris Roselli.
And I'm Alana Baxter. Welcome to Western Window, the show made for you by students at Western Washington University.
This time on Western Window, we'll have a conversation with leading education innovator Milton Chen. We'll find out more about the race to save species.
We'll find out what diversity means to students at Western and much more. So stay with us as we explore our world through Western Window.
Hi there, I am here with Dr. Milton Chen, who is a national leader and an education innovator, as well as a leading figure in educational media for almost 40 years. A lot of people say that you're as good as the company that you keep. Dr. Chen has been in the company of Morgan Freeman, George Lucas, Bert and Ernie, Big Bird, Fred Rogers perhaps?
True, that is true.
He's pretty darn good. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh,
Really
it's my
do
pleasure.
appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, this is very inspiring for me because the people that you have worked with have been on my TV growing up, now on the TV that my children are watching.
Yeah.
You said that you've come from the longest street in the world to a galaxy long ago and far, far away. Explain that a little bit.
Well, those are the bookends of my career. I started working at Sesame Workshop in my 20s. It was a very formative experience for me to spend 5 years in the research department at Sesame Workshop, helping develop programs like the Electric Company and 321 Contact in particular. Back in the day, we developed a pre-science curriculum for Sesame Street. And you were talking about some of the resistance that comes up often when you're trying to do something new in education. There were some early childhood educators who said, well, that'll never work. These kids are too young to understand anything about science. We're having trouble just teaching them basic letters and numbers. So Sesame Street was a great lesson to me that kids could learn more earlier than we thought, because it was an entirely new experience that we had never seen before. And Sesame Street has gone around the globe. It's seen in over 150 different countries. For the same reasons that the United States, the U.S. Office of Education, and some foundations funded the initial season of Sesame Street to have a direct channel in to provide early childhood education, reaching 5 million, 7 million preschool kids in any one program.
Yeah.
It'd be a long time before we could provide universal early childhood education. We're still struggling with that today. Yeah. It was a great investment. And many other ministries of education and foundations around the world then said, we want the same thing for our kids in Mexico, in Europe, in Japan, and in China. So there are international co-productions of Sesame Street called Sesamstrasse or Plaza Sesamo, Rue Sésame. Dramagia is Sesame Street in Chinese.
Okay.
And you can go around the globe and see these programs, and they're playing a role helping the kids in those countries. Now we're trying to bring some of that back to the United States. Now we have the internet to make learning more international, as I like to say. We're bringing some of that online, and then so anyone anywhere can see the Spanish language version of Sesame Street or the Chinese version. So it's an exciting opportunity with the internet.
So you've been a professor at Harvard. You worked as a director of research with the Children's Television Workshop. And currently you're the executive director, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm emeritus. I have an honorary title at the Lucas Educational Foundation.
Okay, tell us a little bit about the Lucas Education Foundation.
Well, it plays an important role, and I give a lot of credit to Mr. Lucas for founding the organization and trying to consider how he could help the millions of students out there who are a lot like him in school. If you go to the Academy of Achievement, I like to recommend it to teachers and students as a way of learning how these very distinguished people came to be and what they were like as kids. You always imagine that Sally Ride wanted to be an astronaut, or Frank Gehry was always this award-winning architect, but in fact he flunked his first architecture class. And George Lucas was not a very good student in high school. He was bored, as he says in that interview, and the one thing he liked as a teenager was cars, and he had a darkroom at home. He was interested in photography and images. So he was trying to find a way, learning how technology was adapting in his own work with digital entertainment and filmmaking. He had the idea that someday kids would have access to these powerful devices. It might take 10 years, it might take 20 years, but that time has arrived. So he asked educators, what could I do to help the millions of kids out there like me who are disengaged in school and not doing very well, but they have interests, they have passions, they have curiosities, and they said, well, you're a filmmaker. If you could make some films about the most innovative schools and classrooms, that would help us a lot. Because we don't even know where they are. We might hear occasionally of them. We are not very good in education at sharing success stories. So edutopia.org and the Lucas Educational Foundation are here to help share that success and spread it broadly, and that's the role that we play.
Shifting back over to the technology component though, it's about making the teaching and learning experience better for our education system. Technology continues to evolve. You started in the 70s with the Children's Television Workshop with this idea of using technology back then at television to teach kids how to rhyme, read,
yes,
count. I'm sure you probably had a little bit of pushback from folks back then with that idea of using technology. How can it be done? How can you assess it? And I'm sure it's not much different nowadays with just new technology, but similar pushback. I mean,
yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that, I guess?
Absolutely. In my career, starting with television, when I started, I remember the days when we would be showing the Electric Company a series on reading to second and third graders outside of Boston, and we'd have to wheel a black and white TV set onto a school auditorium stage and turn it on at the time of broadcast, maybe it's 1:30 or 2 o'clock, in order to present that media experience to kids. So just in my lifetime, it's changed enormously, I think, for the better.
Sure, yeah.
But yes, I do believe that there's always been a lot of resistance, even to educational television.
Yeah.
There's always been complaints that how can you replace the teacher back then and now? We had a discussion about that today. Is it making students more passive because the viewing experience is sometimes it's called a lean back experience rather than a lean in experience?
Sure.
But now with more interactive forms of media, students are leaning in. They're becoming more engaged. So there's always been that, and we're trying to actually provide better research to show how kids can learn. Because in the end, it shouldn't be your opinion or mine. It should rely on what do kids actually learn. Sure. And we're beginning to see more of a research base on the positive effects of technology.
Got a book here, Education Nation. Tell us about this. Now, you've written over 30 books and articles and chapters in your pretty darn esteemed career. So what's up with this book? Why this book?
As I was traveling around, and as you're suggesting, edutopia.org is really meant to be, if you asked Mr. Lucas, who is this website for? He would say it's for anybody who's interested in education. Because it uses film to communicate, we also try to write the articles in a jargon-free way. Our hope would be that parents could access the website to try to understand where education was going. And the website has become quite popular. But often people, educators in particular, would say to me, I've seen the website. There's so much there. There's 150 different schools featured. You've got PDFs on any topic from project-based learning to social emotional learning, ways of encouraging more community. Help me here. I'm a third grade teacher. Just tell me what I should look for.
This is the Cliff Notes.
So this is kind of the Cliff Notes and my version of the best of Edutopia and my effort, as I say, to be a curator of our website. It's sort of the best of the website in a book form.
Woodring College of Education brought you here today as a part of the Dean's Lecture Series. Any impressions of Woodring?
It reminds me a bit of going into some of the schools we've filmed at Edutopia. When you walk into these schools, it takes you just a few minutes to sense the climate of the school. And I sense that here during my visit at Woodring as well. When you walk into this building, you get a sense of the engagement of the faculty, the support for students, the interest in teaching students, and the diversity of students. I had a chance, my very first meeting was in an education class taught by Professor Holscher, and to see these young students, who are maybe sophomores and juniors, beginning to have their first experience working with students, to see that light in their eyes for their interest in working with young people, that's what you want. And the state universities play such an important role and train the vast majority of teachers in our country. I think Woodring is really in a very special place here. We're known for being innovative here in the West, and there's a great spirit about trying to do something different, and in many ways create the kind of college of education that's needed. It's very different from the way in which colleges of education have done their business in the past 20 or 30 years. So I like the fact that you're thinking differently about these issues, And I think Dean Rios has a great leadership that he's bringing to this College of Education.
Thank you very, very much
thank you,
for
Chris.
coming to campus. It was really a true inspiration to get an opportunity to meet you and sit and talk with you. The guy who loves Grover more than any of the other Muppets on Sesame Street, I agree, Dr. Milton Chen. Thanks again.
Thank you.
The variety of life in a particular ecosystem is called biodiversity, and as species go extinct, their loss affects us as much as climate change and pollution. At Western, biology professor David Hooper is conducting groundbreaking research into the effects of the loss of biodiversity, and at Woodland Park Zoo in Seattle, conservationists race to rehabilitate local species before they're lost forever.
I think that zoos today are very different than they were even 20 years ago, where they were more thought of as places for entertainment, and that's sort of shifting from menageries of the past to places that contribute a lot of their donations and ticket sales and everything else to conservation projects. One of the things that I focus on is conservation that takes place in captivity, where we raise animals up in captivity and then release them or reintroduce them back to the wild. There's a whole suite of characteristics that go into selecting a conservation program. Is it a species that's critically endangered and disappearing so rapidly that something needs to be done? And that was the case with the western pond turtle 20 years ago. We were down to 150 animals in our state, and that's why the decision was made at that time to get involved.
Turtles are what we would consider an indicator species, particularly in a wetland habitat. If there's a presence of native turtles, that's usually a good indication that the soil's right, the water's safe. There's resources not only for the turtles, but other animals that live in the same environment. Right now, this year, we had a very good year. Right now we have 181 turtles. 181 turtles this year represents the most turtles that have hatched here since I've been with the project now, which has been about 5.5 years.
Some people might ask, well, why is a turtle or frog important to me? What does that mean for me? Well, those animals are signs of ecosystem health. And without them, they do play a critical role in maintaining the health of the ecosystem. And once they disappear, we can see signs of breakdown in the ecosystem health. I think over our lifetimes, we're going to see tremendous economic influence from biodiversity loss.
Some people say, well, species go extinct all the time, what's the big deal? And yes, that's true. What people are concerned about in terms of biodiversity loss is now the rates of extinction are much higher than they have been in the past. We're at this transition now. Human population is big enough that we're impacting the planet in a major way. The changes are happening so quickly, the amount of forest habitat being lost, the amount of pollution that's compromising coral reefs and other aquatic systems. Those changes are happening really rapidly right now, and it's way easier to nip those changes at the bud than it is to try to reverse them later on.
The zoo is involved in conservation work. It's part of our mission, and I think Woodland Park Zoo does a great job of contributing to the conservation of species around the world, particularly in the Pacific Northwest. We have a project, for example, called Quarters for Conservation. When you first walk in the zoo, there are these kiosks that people can donate a token that they get at the gate to a specific conservation program that we work on. So, you might not notice an economic difference if you lose a species in an ecosystem, but let's say whatever made that species disappear makes 2, and then 3, and then 20, 30. Soon you have half the biodiversity you had 20 years before. I think there are tremendous economic impacts from that, because once the ecosystem starts to break down, you see more emergent diseases arising that can have influence on human health, poor air quality, a poor environment for your children to grow up into, which can result in psychological issues or other problems. So I think there's a tremendous long-term economic impact from biodiversity loss. We know there is. There's evidence to show as much.
Western Washington University President Bruce Shepard stirred controversy recently when he brought attention to the lack of diversity on college campuses. Reporters from Western's 115-year-old student newspaper, the Western Front, sat down with Dr. Shepard to find out more about his comments and Western's vision for its future.
No, I appreciate your asking. It's something I've been saying for 6 years, the 6 years I've been here at Western. It really has to do with the nature of our state and our mission. We're 90% Washington State students. We exist to serve the state of Washington, to apply our strengths to its critical needs. What are the critical needs of the state of Washington? If you look, we rank 48th out of the 50 states in the size of the pipeline Washington provides to baccalaureate education. Yet it's a flattened, globally competitive world out there that needs ever better educated people. Washington hasn't been producing them. We need to educate more people at the baccalaureate level. Where are those people going to come from? The high school graduation rates are flat and projected to remain flat for the foreseeable future. But that hides a dramatic change in what's happening among high school graduates. More and more of that flat level of high school graduates are coming from families where parents have not gone to college, and where aspirations may be to not go on to college as well. That is, if we're to fulfill our mission, that's what we need to do. We aren't talking about keeping whites out. That had never, ever even occurred to me, and that's one reason why I was a little bit surprised at the reactions. The truth is that those who we have traditionally served as a university are coming from families of smaller family size or not there in the numbers we're going to need to meet our obligations to the state. I think that the most, we don't set targets, we don't set goals. And I think that's the wrong way to go about it. What would be ideal is to reflect the ethnic and racial composition of Washington's graduating high school classes. That would be an ideal world in which this is, I'm going to get a little bit emotional on you here, but I've talked about the self-interested reasons why we need to be more diverse, but there are also questions of social justice here that we should not ignore either, and they, to me, are just as motivating. What is right and proper in our society to do? And I come to the sentence that a person's access to public higher education should not depend upon the circumstances of their birth. And so if we are reflecting the ethnic racial composition of the high school graduating class, that to me is a significant step in that direction. We look at those data. We're about 7% behind those data overall the last time I looked at those data. So it's not a huge gap, but it's a moving target too. As we become more diverse, the high school graduating class becomes more diverse. So that's why we have to keep at this. Not at all. I don't believe so. I think that our students really do get it, and in fact, it is really our students who are holding our feet to the fire, along with our board of trustees and our faculty and staff, saying this university has to be living its mission, not just continuing in traditional ways. I have really been impressed with how our students, whatever their background, really are inclusive.